Good, we are hitting the hour, so let's actually get ongoing on this one. So probably get a lot of people joining slightly late. I can see the participant count going up immediately when I said that, which is pretty typical. For this one, this is the PnP special interest group for PnP Site Score and PnP PowerShell. But because we had a pretty exciting SP Summit yesterday, and we had a pretty exciting build discussion, or let's say Microsoft Build last week, related on SharePoint, the future SharePoint development investments. We're planning to actually show some of those today in this call as well. If you are in the SharePoint framework development as well, we actually went through our build demo as an exclusive preview in last week's SIG call, which is the special interest group for special SharePoint framework and JavaScript development. But what I wanted to do today is kind of have an open discussion, kind of a walkthrough, maybe the demo through just explaining what it actually means and what it also means from a provisioning and automation perspective. Because obviously, when we are having a discussion on the SharePoint framework, it means that quite often people want to use the SharePoint framework, client-side web parts and extensions within their deployments. How do we get those things deployed? How do we get those things deployed on 100,000 site collections? And that's where the PnP provisioning engine will help, most likely through PnP PowerShell or the PnP using the PnP PowerShell or the CSAM extension in Azure side. But first, before we go to those topics, and we also have a discussion on the CDN, I think I have actually agenda slides. It probably helps if I move to that slide. And I wanted to quickly also touch the Office 365 CDN slightly. If we have time, I'll do a live demo on that one as well, because we actually haven't gone through that in detail in any of our special interest group calls. Just making sure that people are aware of it. It is actually super cool capability, and let's walk through what are the benefits out of the CDN as well. Now, let's actually do a few miscellaneous announcements, and most likely Bert will do this, or do you want me to talk about this as well? Because Bert has been working on the documentation improvements.
Yeah, I can talk about those. So first announcement is finally we have an API. We will have an API reference for PnP Site Score library. Maybe you remember, but we did this for PowerShell like I think 2 months ago, Vesa, 3 months ago, something like that. And the idea is to have similar level of documentation for the PnP Site Score. So if you're using PnP Site Score just as a library, so you pull down the NuGet package, you're not interested in using the source code, then this gives you like a documentation how to use it. This is auto-generated documentation, so essentially kind of doing reading the XML documents that we add in the code, and we should add more of those. So that's already an ask for the community. If you see missing inline documentation, feel free to do a pull request and add it, because now it will be really useful, because that will show up in this MSDN documentation. But yeah, we just generate based on our XML documentation, based on reflection of the library, we generated a whole bunch of MD files, which then show up in MSDN. We'll also open source the component doing this, which is definitely useful for if you have like your own DLLs that you want to document. I think you can start from that one. It is a bit like Sandcastle, but way more lightweight and simpler, and targeted for generating MD files.
Yeah, I think that Sandcastle is a great tool, but it's surprisingly complex actually. I always wondered why didn't we include the native documentation support for Visual Studio. But
yeah, I looked into Sandcastle instead of writing our own, but it was like, yeah, it was quite complex to use and to change it actually. So sure. This is fairly simple, lightweight code.
Sure.
So, but that's coming. Target release date, I would say like in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, more or less.
Oh, I was
it's not a top priority project, but it will get there. I would like to show you guys on a preview, but our MSDN staging environment is down for the moment, so I can't show you a preview. That's why I pasted this screenshot. This is the MD file in GitHub. You can see that those already. If you go to the PnP guidance repository, and you will see these already these MD files, but then they should be showing up on MSDN fairly soon. Right. Can you move
Bert,
to
what do you mean with 2 to 3 weeks? I was expecting 2 to 3 hours. No, just kidding.
Yeah, depends on which quality you want. Okay, so that's announcement number 1. Announcement number 2 is around around Access apps. So you might have heard or have not heard it, but we essentially deprecated Access apps in online. So this only applies to SharePoint Online. So in SharePoint on premises, everything stays as is, so no worries. Now, if you have an Access app in online, what will happen is that actually, as of June 2017, so as of next month, we will prevent you from creating new Access apps. And the target shutdown date for the existing Access apps is April 2018, which is still quite a while out, but nevertheless, if you're really depending on Access apps, you need to do something about it because they will be stopped. Product group has created guidance, so I pasted already a link over. If the screenshot there is a whole document describing how to convert Access apps in using Power Apps, build new apps based on Power Apps platform. So there is guidance for you. Now, what was missing is a scanner, essentially like telling you where are your Access apps living in your tenant. And that's something that PnP is building today. So you will see this go live also in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully. We're still waiting for some PG improvements. So the scanner today is ready on the PnP tools repository, so you can already have a look and do like a beta testing if you want. But product group will make additional data available about your Access apps, and that data will then be included in the scanner report. So I'm waiting for that to be finalized, so then we can give you like a full set of information, Access apps you have, and kind of information about the Access apps, how many tables, how many reports, how many macros, kind of gives you an impression of the complexity. When was it last time used? It's an important metric to understand whether you need to do something about it or not. That's about it, Vesa, for the quick announcements.
Cool. Let's move on other things. So before we go to yesterday's SharePoint Summit, well, to be more precise, before we go through the, let's say, the changes in the SharePoint platform level, which we announced actually in Build, because with Build is the developer conference. Yesterday's SharePoint Summit was more around the IT Pro and end user capabilities. I wanted to quickly kind of walk through this one slide, which is making sure that we're all on the same page around what does the SharePoint framework mean currently, what is the future, where we will be using what, and all of that. So super simplistic slide, high-level architecture, high-level thinking on the technologies, and obviously these are debatable and all of that. But I wanted to kind of a double check and make sure that everybody are online on our let's say initial thinking and internal thinking and engineering as well. Now, SharePoint framework. Originally, actually, SharePoint framework was almost called as a SharePoint UI framework. So SharePoint framework is mainly targeted right now, at least. In the future, it might mean something else as well. But it is user interface framework for extending SharePoint using JavaScript. So essentially, you have JavaScript-based customizations hosted in SharePoint. Typically, they're hosted from CDN. Technically, you can host those JavaScript files directly from your SharePoint tenant as well, if that's a major deal for you, if you're not willing to use the CDN. Maybe one thing to notice on the CDN, because this came up within the one of the discussions in the tech community side, if you have the JavaScript in CDN and you're using the public CDN, the Office 365 public CDN, which is free for you to use in the context of SharePoint, in Office 365, that means that your JavaScript logic, the JavaScript file, is in the CDN. But none of the content, none of the secrets, none of the things, unless you hardcode them to your JavaScript file, are exposed. So even though you would be using the public CDN, none of your existing data or content would be compromised because it's just the logic which is hosted in CDN. When that JavaScript file is put in the SharePoint Online or executed in the context of SharePoint Online with SharePoint Framework, then that's when we say the context and end user can actually access the data. So just to be super clear on that. And like mentioned, SharePoint framework right now, at least, we don't know where the future, what the future will bring. But right now, it's a UI framework for developing JavaScript customizations in SharePoint. And for the modern experiences, for the modern, like the communicational sites, which we announced yesterday, or modern experiences in team sites, SharePoint framework is the only way to embed JavaScript on those sites. Because then in the modern experiences, customers and everybody else and Microsoft we wanted to make sure that we do not break you in the future. So if you take a dependency, for example, for application customizers, which I'm going to explain slightly later today, if you haven't followed up on our build presentations, we will guarantee that that will work in the future as well. That's the benefit of SharePoint framework. In the old way of embedding JavaScript on a site and modifying the DOM structure, you never knew when your stuff actually was getting broken. So that's really fundamental change. And that's one of the reasons why we ask people to use SharePoint framework so that you're more future-proof within your JavaScript customizations. Now, this does not mean that client-side object model or PnP provisioning and all of that is going to go away. That's absolutely part of the game in the future as well. So whenever you have a backend service, whenever you have something which you cannot do in JavaScript, like you need to do elevation of privileges, which is impossible to do in JavaScript, to do technology, not just Microsoft or SharePoint limitations, do technology limitations. So that's where you call an external API, Azure Function, Web API. You can take advantage of web jobs, relatively common scenario for long-running operations. And that's where you use then, for example, PnP PowerShell, PnP CSOM, or you can use native CSOM or REST APIs or Graph APIs to call the data which is in Office 365. So just making sure that that's essentially clear for everybody who are in the call. Now there's some background noise. I'm going to mute some people in the call. And thank you. Somebody was helping me on that, probably Bert. So. CSOM, PnP, CSOM, PowerShells, and all of that, absolutely future-proven, and they will be used in the server side, in Azure, or in AWS, or in wherever you're hosting your external services. Doesn't really matter. And they're a convenient way to call back on the SharePoint. So you're able to do operations on SharePoint. You're able to, for example, apply a provisioning template or PnP provisioning template, or whatever other configurations to your SharePoint site. Using those remote APIs. So just wanted to kind of clarify that one and have a discussion on that. Quick note maybe on the Azure Functions. It's a hot new fellow, and we've been having a lot of demos in these calls as well on that one. One thing to notice with Azure Functions is that if you're doing heavy operations within your backend, Azure Functions isn't actually the tool for that. Azure Function is meant to be for lightweight operations, which are running less than 5 minutes, and it doesn't really support that well, at least the free options, support that well really high-end and massive load. If you need to truly scale and you have a long-running operations, then the web jobs are the right way to do it. So, and you can mix and match these, absolutely. So you can, for example, from your SharePoint framework web part or wherever, you can call an Azure function, which is then adding an item to storage queue, and that is firing then a web job, which is executing for 30 minutes or whatever. And that's absolutely valid scenario. So just making sure that we're fine with that. Good. And moving on things. So let's see. Latest on SharePoint development. So quick few slides on this one. So I wanted to quickly go through what did we went through in the build. Yesterday there was SharePoint Summit, and we saw some of the social media communications that, hey, SharePoint development wasn't mentioned that much. That was kind of an intentional thing. Last week we had a build conference. Last week we also did announcements on the new capabilities within the SharePoint development, mainly in the SharePoint Online. Well, except the announcement that yes, SharePoint framework client-side web parts will land on premises SharePoint 2016 as part of the feature pack 2. Now the question is, when does the feature pack 2 come out? And I do not know. I don't know if that's even disclosed for the time being. But SharePoint Framework, client-side web parts, SharePoint 2016 as part of the feature pack code, feature pack 2, which is a big thing. Now, the other things what we actually announced, and I wanted to actually start with those 3 announcements. I'm going to walk these through one by one. I can do a quick demo depending on how the time is permitting us on this one as well. So we announced web part to web part connections, so client-side web part to web part connections and communication between the web parts. Essentially what it means that you can have, let's say, list and a details web parts, and when somebody is selecting an item in the list web part, you're essentially saying, hey, this item was selected, and if there's any other web part in a page which might be interested about this event, here you go, and the other web part can actually show additional details and do additional options and whatever is need to be done. Right now, it's only for code-based customizations, so we do not have a UI yet for that one. We're looking into having a UI for that one as well in the future. So the SharePoint framework, which is the underlying service also in the Pages library and the Pages experience, would be recognizing that, hey, there's a web part which is drawing this kind of an event. Oh, there's another web part on the page which could actually get that event. So you're able to then, from a UI perspective, do the connection as well if you're an end user. The second big thing is SharePoint extensions, and this is a huge thing. Essentially, it doesn't mean that much, and it is actually not SharePoint extensions to SharePoint framework. It is extensions to SharePoint to host your JavaScript, for example, for showing and presenting information in the different areas of SharePoint. That didn't make that much sense. I'm going to show that one in practice in a second. But what it means is that we have a modern way of doing JS link and user custom action, if you're looking into making those happen in the modern experiences. So that's what the SharePoint framework extensions are essentially enabling. And then the third thing, which is a big thing as well, so as part of the underlying Office 365, we are all using now an OpenID Connect underneath. The SharePoint Online still has its own kind of a unique authentication model, which is due legacy reasons as well. But what this means is that you will have a native APIs to request an OpenID access token, and then you're able to call an external services in Office 365, additional services on behalf of the user. And that's a massive deal, because what it also means is that it's not super explicitly mentioned here. You are able to call a Graph API without additional authentications, as an example. We'll start with a subset of scopes in a Graph API, and we'll extend that in the future. We're also looking into enabling third-party API scenarios. So you're able to get an access token and then pass that access token to third-party API, and then in the third-party web API or whatever it is, and you're still able to work around with that token and get the permissions and what the user is having. And that's a massive deal. That's a huge thing. Now, and thank you, Bert, for taking care of the questions. Web part to web part connection, just quickly explaining this, kind of explained this one already. Yesterday in the SharePoint Summit, we actually announced a multi-column canvas, which is a good thing. You were able to see that in the demos as well. So you're able to have in the future multi-columns in the canvas. So the page is not just a single page with the vertical scroll. But for the web part to web part connection, that's a typical subscribe and event model. Essentially, the list web part is saying, hey, this item was selected by end user. If there's anybody on the page who's interested about this one, here you go, and have fun. And that's essentially how it works. So a quick kind of a clarification on that one. We have two web parts on a page, side by side. As an example, it doesn't really matter. Are they side by side or between well, on top of each other. There's one web part which is subscribing to events saying, hey, if there's any of the X events happening, I'm interested on that for the SharePoint framework. And then there's another web part which is essentially throwing an event with a specific ID saying, hey, here's an event. Hey, SharePoint framework, if there's any web parts, other web parts on the page who are interested, I have this event and this has happened. And the traffic is routed to SharePoint framework through the communications. Good. And quick question answer on Varthaman's question. Is there more info available on getting the OpenID Connect token in SharePoint? Right now, no. So all of this is getting available as part of the dev preview update, which is coming in few weeks. So not in months, within a few weeks, whenever we get the basic set of APIs locked down. We're pretty close, but we want to make sure that we don't have to break you as much as with the initial SharePoint framework release with the after the dev preview. So within weeks, or so within pretty soon, there's a new package of SharePoint framework being pushed on the servers, and also a new set of Yeoman templates available. And as part of that, you will also get a Graph API client, which you can use to get access tokens or call Graph API directly. And that's a massive deal, obviously. Good. Trying to watch the questions at the same time. This is just a quick example of raising an event. So this is somebody, one web part, there's an on item click event, and it's raising the event called training master item selected. And then it can actually throw data as part of that event as well. And it's also setting source ID. Right now, the target ID actually doesn't have any meaning. And then on the other side, the web part who's interested about those events is essentially saying, hey, SharePoint framework, I'm interested about the event called training master item selected. If anybody throws that event, call my another function, which I have implemented here. Relatively simple thing. And then you're able to obviously get access to the data, what the other web part is actually showing on the other side. Good. Other things. So we started with the connections, then going to the SharePoint framework extensions. And for me, at least, this is the number one and super exciting thing, what we have available. So we'll walk through 3 different scenarios with this page, just making sure that everybody can see this. Application customizer. That's the number one customizer, which is essentially a mechanism for you to embed JavaScript on the user custom action collection in a secured way using the SharePoint framework at the site collection site or in a list level. And essentially, you can use that implementation any way you want. You can use Google or embed Google Analytics. You can embed whatever other tracking software. You can embed whatever JavaScript you want. Or alternatively, we are giving you also a specific IDs on the page, which we will guarantee that they will remain there for the future with the UI changes as well. So right now in the dev preview, we'll start with only one guaranteed location, and I do apologize on that, but we absolutely understand that there might be additional locations where you want to embed your JavaScript customizations. But the number one location will be the top header. So you're able to essentially say, my application customizer, in the application customizer, you're able to say, hey, SharePoint framework, give me an instance to that header section of the page. And then it's up to you what you want to do with that. You're able to render information, you're able to render buttons or mega menus or whatever you want to do on that section. In future, like mentioned, we're looking into having footer and a few other sections on the pages as well after the dev preview. Good. The second thing what we announced is the comment set customizer. Essentially, hey, if somebody is selecting for example, 2 documents in this library, I want to have a button which will pop up a pop-up window where I can manipulate those items, or I want to do a customization based on the selection. So you're able to execute code when somebody clicks a button or clicks a menu item, either in toolbar or in the context menu. And super cool thing as well. So you're able to then bypass, you actually get the information like, hey, this item was selected, or these items were selected, depending again on your scenario, and what I want to do with them. Again, up to you, what I want to do with them. You're able to call an external API with that information. You're able to do whatever you want to do within the scenario. And this is clever enough that you're able to configure, for example, that, hey, my button is only available when there's multiple items selected, not just one, if that's the case. And then the third thing, which isn't super visible on the demo first, but when I actually light up that, then you might be understanding that section. We are actually, in this scenario, we're intentionally hiding phone number values and emergency contact in the field. What we're doing here is that we are taking advantage of the new or the modern implementation of JS-Link. Essentially, your JavaScript takes responsibility of rendering that field output within the read-only mode. So essentially, you have full control what you want to render. It could be a button, it could be a map, it could be an image, it could be whatever you want. Or you can modify the styling of the field and render the output as it is. Now, in the dev preview, we'll start with a only for support on overriding the rendering style and the rendering time, but in the longer run, we need to also have the support for editing experience. So you're able to modify the editing controls for the field values as well. Hopefully that did make sense with my English pronunciation and all of that. Finglish pronunciation. Now, so once again, we have an application customizer to embed JavaScript across all of the pages within a scope, which means list, site, or site collection. We have command set customizer to embed JavaScript related on action buttons. So for example, do a pop-up when somebody clicks a button and then do something in a pop-up, you'll get all of the needed information. Or a field customizer to embed JavaScript code to the field specific UI rendering. And in the future, after the dev preview, we'll give you the editing experience for that one as well. Good. Yes, Finglish. In my LinkedIn profile, I have English, Finnish, and Finglish as my official languages. Now, let's do a quick demo on this one because we apparently have time to do that, which is good. I've been talking relatively fast, but I wanted to quickly show you the demo what we did in the build as well. If you missed that, that gives you also an opportunity to ask them questions after we've gone through everything, unless I'm catching your question in the window. Good. Dun, 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 dun. Cool. So somebody needs to confirm that you're able to see what I'm sharing. This is essentially the basic setup, what I did as a demo in build last week as well.
It's visible.
Cool. Thank you, Bert. If it's visible in Belgium, it should be visible, and Ryan can see it as well. Excellent. So, relatively simplistic scenario. So first of all, let me show you, for example, first the connection web part. Quickly, I have a list of training classes, which is a lot of metadata on the individual training class. So let's create quickly a page here. So I'm adding a page, and it doesn't take too long. In this particular environment, because I'm using Canary tenant, I do not have a side-by-side sections available. Unfortunately, that's still in the development, so it hasn't been yet been available in the Canary tenant. So there's my list of items, and then what I want to do is that I'm going to add another web part here. In future, like I said, you can do side-by-side. That's absolutely fine. And there we go. Now we have another web part which is saying no class selected. So now let's save this one. Page title cannot be blank. Cannot be blank. Yes, it can. No. So now I can actually search items, my training class items. I can do rafting, and then it is showing me the items, or I can do advanced trainings, and I can see the items from there. Let's see if we do orienteering, and then I click that one. I can actually see the details around that class because the upper section, this web part, essentially send the message to this web part. Actually go and show the pictures and locations, maps, and it actually did another query checking who are the people who have enrolled to this training. So obviously it's again up to you how complex your implementation is. Now let's do, it could be something like managing in forest, my favorite training, managing in forest at Finland, and Bob has already signed up for that one. Anyway. Simplistic scenario, simplistic thing, but really kind of a classic scenario, and it makes a lot of sense that we need to have that one for client-side web parts as well. The second quick demo was also around the application customizers and also field customizers. In my case, I haven't actually done customization here, which is a command set customizer, but we'll get you the tutorials and code and everything else when the dev preview actually starts. So in this case, I have a class roster and all of the items we're seeing 3 different columns and fields visible. If I go and modify the field, and I'm adding here emergency contact, emergency phone number, and phone number, because within the business scenario, somebody has said that, that information is confidential. By default, when we add those fields in the page, we can see those fields not being visible. So now if I scroll on top of it, the field renderer or the JavaScript within the field understands that, hey, okay, your mouse is on top of me, so therefore I'm going to flip my style so I'm again readable. The other thing what actually happened was that because we added these fields on this page, and application customizer said, hey, now you have confidential fields on the page, so therefore I will show a link to our company guidelines related on sensitive information. So this is essentially a user custom action, which is tagged in this case in the list level. No, actually in site level, if I remember correctly. And then, like mentioned, the third one, which I do not have a demo on that one, but is the command set customizer. So enable that, for example, additional commands here, which will open up or execute JavaScript, for example, open up a pop-up and so on, or add a button in here, which will then, or additional toolbox button, which will then pop up or execute JavaScript. And again, up to you how the JavaScript is actually executed. Good. And good point from Bert Janssen. So for the modern experiences and modern lists, modern sites, all of that, the existing user custom action customizations, they do not work because they're not safe. And user custom action, which would modify the UIs, is always kind of fragile because whenever we in Microsoft Online or our engineering is doing small modifications in the UI, polishing something, it might actually interfere with your implementation. Because in the classic scenario, the implementation is based on the DOM structure of the page. You're essentially assuming that there's a div there, there's a div which ID is following. Let's hook into that div and expand or get my customization there. Now, within this implementation and the modern implementation, and let me actually show you this one in practice. You'll obviously get a human template. I can actually quickly show that one as well. So updated human templates for all of these are coming. So let me go to PnP and do yo Microsoft SharePoint. Dun, 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 dun. Whenever it actually starts executing that, come on, you can do it. There we go. There's my human template. Let's call it PnP. Let's do a no JavaScript framework. I'm not going to go through this because it takes quite a long time to create the initial solution. But we have a new selection here. Which type of client-side components to be created? I can select extension, and after that, I can select field, list view, or application customizer. And then it's again. If I run through the whole process, it's going to scaffold me the basic setup for a solution. You can obviously add these customizers to existing client-side solution. You can mix and match because the baseline solution is exactly the same for extensions and client-side webpoints. So let's actually break that one. This is the demo setup which we did for build. And let me slightly zoom that. And quickly just showing, for example, this one. So this is the list header application customizer. This fellow is responsible of throwing that blue bar on top of the page. And how we did that is that it actually, we do guarantee the specific set of locations in the pages, which will be there in the future as well. So in this case, whenever we actually render, with this execution is requesting from SharePoint Framework that, hey, SharePoint Framework, give me the location for page header. Maybe in future, well, page header is probably always in the page header, but it might be that there will be a nested divs, or it will be slightly changed. The DOM structure of the page, HTML DOM structure of the page will be changed. But we will guarantee that you will actually get the div instance in here. And then it's again up to you what do we want to do. So you have full control on render anything inside of that div, and that will then work within the modern experiences as well, which is a big thing. In this case, we're using React, so we're rendering then a React component, which is then getting that div as a parameter. So nothing super special, and no point actually going through how we're actually rendering the stuff, but to get the basic idea how these things are working. The same thing, quickly showing the field customizer. So let's go to the privacy field. Let's open that one. Actual implementation. This is on render cell. Essentially, is the method which is getting called, and then it's up to you what you want to render. So you can render the value as it is, you can render an image, you can render a button, you have full control again. What do you want to render on that actual cell div, what you're getting as a reference. So you'll own that div, it's up to you what you want to do. And it can be as complex or as simple as actually needed. Now, maybe a quick note on this. So how all of this actually works, and I didn't actually, let me open up that one. Set user custom action to list. Yes, that's actually a good one. Because it actually shows both of the scenarios. This is a really quick CSAM console, which I did only for my demo setup perspective. But in practice, how do we hook these things up? So all of these extensions, they have a unique ID. For example, this privacy field customizer has a unique ID over there. That's its unique ID. Or the header application customizer has a unique ID as well, which is in here. And how the implementation works is that you, as part of the deployment as the solution, or using what other alternative means, you will associate this application customizer to user custom collection in the site collection or in a site or in a list level. Or in the same way, in the same way with the field customizer, you will essentially say client-side component ID for a specific field equals this one. So whenever the SharePoint is actually rendering that field in the UI, it will understand that, hey, there's an application customizer associated to this field. Hey, I can find the application customizer from an app catalog. Okay, let's render the JavaScript out. And that's how it actually, that's how the implementation is done. So for a quick demo setup, this is just a CSAM connectivity to my that's actually the right tenant, and I'm connecting there, and then we are adding client-side component ID for custom action and the location for custom action, and that's it. So this one will then tie in all of those application customizers which have been deployed in the application catalog, and if there's a match, that JavaScript will be rendered. And the same kind of setup for fields as well. So in this case, I'm accessing the web fields collection and then adding the client-side component ID to making sure that my custom JavaScript is getting implemented or executed. Now, there's also client-side component properties. These are relatively new properties in CSAM. They came out in February release, if I remember. And this one is actually eating up JSON configuration. So what it means is that you can do something, this is just a mockup, type equals 2, and that could actually change the behavior of your component. For example, let's say rendering type for this particular instance. But for another instance of your customizer, you'll use a slightly different basic configuration. So it gives some flexibility on the implementation. Good. I think that sums up quickly going through the extensibility points on this one. Any basic questions around, and this user custom action adding is available through PnP PowerShell. Yes, you can absolutely add that in the PnP PowerShell as well. We're looking into having the ID support and component ID support and component client-side properties support. So support for these settings also in the PnP templates. So looking into getting that one to the June release, we were unable to tell you those and this extensibility in the past, but now we can actually implement that in the GitHub as well. So you can then reconfigure or configure your templates in a way that the fields and customizers, user custom actions and everything is properly set for the sites which are getting created, and voila, we can get stuff moving. Good. Now, let's get back on the slides, maybe for 2 seconds, because I was planning to do another demo as well, which is around the CDN. Just quickly explaining you how it actually works, but I flip back on the content, and then that's the right presentation. And there we go, showing. There we go. Good. So, before we go to the CDN discussion, I wanted to kind of raise awareness on the CDN as well, because I know that people have kind of missed that announcement as well. SharePoint Framework Roadmap, just quickly explaining web parts already G8. We are adding additional components, additional capabilities on the web parts as we move along. Extensions will go to dev preview within weeks, not within months, so pretty soon. And then we're looking into getting to the GA relatively soon as well. Well, not obviously on the following weeks of the dev preview, because the GA release really depends on how much feedback we are getting, what kind of issues community is finding, and we'll address those when it's polished enough. We'll actually do a GA on the extensions. Then we're looking into having SharePoint Framework support in add-ins, because add-ins is 100% valid approach in modern experiences as well. So since last week, or was it week before, if you have installed an add-in to a modern SharePoint site and it has an app web part, or what is it, client web part, app part, add-in part, I don't know what they call it. Those are also available from the web part picker. So you can use add-ins in the modern pages as well. Big thing. And in the future, we're looking into having them natively responsive, built using SharePoint Framework, or all of that. Because if you're an ISV and you want to get to the store, add-ins is one way of doing that. Also, some customers want to have security isolation, not just getting JavaScript embedded on the page. Then you can fall back on the add-ins, but you still can use SharePoint Framework as an underlying service for your UIs and all of that implementation in your add-in side. And then we're looking into other additional areas as well. So there's a lot of stuff and innovation, and a lot of stuff in our backlog. We'll get some of gradually the stuff released on the SharePoint development side. And this is landing also in on-premises, which is the one thing what I mentioned when we started as well. So as part of the feature pack 2, SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2, the client-side web parts are heading to the on-premises. Extensions might miss that, but then they will come in the later stages. We'll see how the timing actually goes. And what we want to do with SharePoint Framework is that it doesn't matter if you're doing on-premises or cloud, you are able to actually implement your UI customizations in the same way. That's really the intention. Now, quickly on the Office 365 CDN, we have plenty of time because I don't talk too much extra anyway, never. So, a few points on this one. So we have Office 365 public Office 365 CDN. Why did I actually? Well, the title is actually wrong because it should be Office 365 CDN, not just Office 365 public CDN. But it's now G8. As part of the Office 365 CDN, we introduced a new additional capability, which is private CDN. So I'm trying to explain what it actually means. But the key point of Office 365 CDN is that if you have customizations, images, JavaScript files as part of your portals or collaboration site customizations or your client-side web parts, you can host them in SharePoint Online and publish a library or document library or folder through Office 365 CDN. And that will make performance better. Because you are essentially publishing your assets through CDN network, which is wider than our Office 365 network. So we are using industry standard CDN providers in the backend, but we're kind of hiding all of the hiding the complexity of setting up CDNs. You just go to your tenant, enable the CDN, put your stuff in a certain document library, which is set as a source of your CDN, and voila, they will be served natively from a CDN side, which is super cool. And yeah, Bert gave it away on the IAM discussion because I didn't want to actually give it away because it might be that we'll change that in the future. Who knows? So that's why we don't mention the technology. But anyway, Bert gave away that on the background. Now, indeed, let's erase the previous 2 minutes on the discussion. Doesn't matter that much. Now, the public CDN is for anonymous access, and public CDN is something. Let me actually go to the following slide, and I'll explain that in practice. But this is by default, CDN is disabled. And the tenant administrator can enable that, and after that it can be used by the customizations. Now, so public CDN, how does it actually work? So tenant administrator enables the CDN in the tenant, and then static assets, CSS files, PNG files, JavaScript files, the stuff which isn't executed on server side. So no ASPX files, no master pages, no that kind of stuff. Only static assets can be uploaded to that document library, which has been set as the CDN origin, and there can be multiple. And then when that happens, those assets are getting published through the CDN network. And what it means is that in the customizations or in the pages, you're able to reference those as well-known URLs, which are specific for your tenant, and you're able to essentially reference that location for the images and JavaScript files and CSS. And that will make sure that it's faster, so your experience is faster in Office 365. Typical scenario would be, for example, SharePoint Framework client-side web port, because you need to host that JavaScript somewhere, which is actually the web port. As part of the PnP provisioning templates and configurations and automation, as part of the June release, we're looking into enabling CDN, having kind of a configuration, so you're able to say, I want to create a document library as part of this template, and I want to enable that to be a CDN origin. So the engine will execute that code and will do all of that configuration on behalf of you. And then the private CDN is something, one thing to maybe to mention in here. So the public CDN means that those assets are anonymously available through the well-known URL, or whatever is your well-known URL, but it's a tenant specific URL, and I'll come back on that one in a second. Typically, images, CSS files, JavaScript files, they don't contain actually any content. They don't contain, especially if it's for branding, if it's for client-side web parts. And obviously, you should never ever hardcode any keys or secrets directly on a JavaScript file, because that's just a bad practice. So getting them served from a public CDN using anonymous endpoint isn't that big of a deal. But if that's an issue, maybe this isn't the right solution for you. Again, debatable. How do we want to do this? Brian is asking, how does the content expire in public CDN? So if you actually upload a new asset, we will fire a new item has arrived event internally, and we'll notify the CDN endpoint for that, and it will essentially then serve that one out. I think there is a is it 30-minute timeout? I can't remember. It is in the blog post around the CDN announcement. So if you look for Office 365 CDN GA, you can find all of the timings, all of the other stuff in that blog post. I can't remember. And 15 minutes is mentioned on the IAM window. Somebody remembers what I've written. That's always good, because I can't remember what I'm writing. Anyway, private CDN. So private CDN is something which you can enable, and what it means is, that in the same way you can publish assets out, and then essentially what happens when somebody is requesting let's say a portal page, a publishing page, and the private CDN is targeted for WCM publishing sites. So it is really not for collaboration sites, it is when you are using WCM publishing engine and pages. So if you have a WCM classic publishing page, we will rewrite any asset which is stored in the CDN origin, essentially a document library which has been marked as a CDN origin. When we are rendering that page for the end user and sending that through the pipe, we're essentially referencing that item dynamically using the CDN URL. So you don't have to do any modifications within your existing implementation. Let's say that you have a custom master page or a custom page layout, or you have images which are used, or logos within your pages, or you're associating images within your page layouts from your site assets folder. If you enable site assets to be a CDN origin, will dynamically change the URL which is referencing the image, pointing through the CDN. And that will make your pages significantly faster. Again, the performance increase slightly depends on the implementation. So we cannot actually go and say, when you do this, it's going to be 40% faster. No, it really depends again on what kind of content your pages are made of, how they're implemented, and all of that. Now, it will have a significant increase on your performance. So if you enable the private CDN, there should how would I say this in the right way? There's no risks of doing that. We haven't run any issues with any of our internal portals as well. We'll rewrite the stuff for you automatically, and magically your content images, CSS files, and all of that are coming from the CDN network. And this is also secure. So private CDN is secure. So we are essentially basically checking that the end user has access to assets within that document folder. So we actually check the document folder permissions so that the user has access there. If the user doesn't have access, for example, the site assets folder where images are being stored, we're not exposing that through the CDN. Hopefully that did make kind of sense. Good. How to enable the CDN in your tenant. This is a tenant level or SPO admin management shell operation. So you'll just essentially run set SPO tenant CDN enabled, and you'll have a switch of public or private, and you can choose either way. And then this enables CDN with the default settings optimized for publishing sites. You can adjust those settings as you move along. Sorry for that. And there's additional switches within the those commandlets. Here's a basic setup of PowerShell commandlets, which can be used for configuring the CDN within your tenant. And I'm looking for is that I'll get you the link to the public CDN. Where do we have that? Office 365 CDN. So adding that link over there. So the CDN configuration, and there's additional links. There's the announcement blog post, which is relatively long. I tend to write way too long blog posts as well. But you can control how are they enabled, disabled, what are the origins. You can do wildcard origins, so you're able to say all site assets folder across my tenant are fine. You can also define some of these tenant policy settings. We are specific on which of them are currently already working. Some of them, like a restricted based on site classification, isn't yet working, or it wasn't working when we went G8, but I think it might be already working today. Anyway, so it should be already working properly. So you're able to essentially say that, hey, when site.classification equals, let's say, super secret, let's not use CDN. Or something like that. That's essentially the scenario. The commandlets have been documented as well in the TechNet, and all should be good from that perspective. Good. Quickly double checking the questions on this one. I'm not going to actually walk through. I'm not going to walk through the demo right now because we're running out of time. In the blog post, which I put it in the IM window, there is a video which would be pretty much what I was planning to show you guys. Anyway, I think it's 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, because I tend to talk too much. But you can. It shows how to enable, how to double check that CDN is working, and all of that. Just double checking questions. Yes, and one thing Bert is actually pointing out the good point, which I should have maybe mentioned more explicitly. You cannot use Office 365 CDN to host assets which would be executed from somewhere else. So we do have a referrer limitations or filtering. So this is not really for hosting all of your assets if you have a website in Azure. The Office 365 CDN is targeted to improve the performance of SharePoint Online. So as long as the referrer, I can't pronounce it that properly, never mind, whatever that's in English. As long as that's SharePoint.com or certain special cases with a certain customers, then it will work. So we will actually request this through the CDN. If you're trying to reference an image through public CDN, which would be a reference in an HTML page hosted, for example, in Azure, that doesn't work. So really important thing to understand. Now, like mentioned, I was kind of planning to do a quick demo on this one. Probably I'm looking on the clock because I want to have if there's any time for Q&A, but we're running out of time pretty soon. So I'm going to skip the demo. I do apologize on that. If there's a lot of interest, I can do a live demo and better Q&A on the CDN on next time, for example. Good. Any questions, comments, feedback, what I've missed in the IM window?
Referrer.
Thank you, Bill.
Referrer.
Yes.
No worries.
Say it properly. Referrer.
You can teach me Finnish later.
Yeah, that's a deal. Good. Will there be a deploy in the Gulf tasks for SharePoint? So this relates on client-side web part development. We're looking into doing that natively in SharePoint Online, in SharePoint Framework. Right now, there's already Elio Struff and Victor Villain has done a great additional comments, which are available in GitHub around that one. So that right now in a short time frame, have a look on those. In a long time, that should be available in our native deployment. The Gulf deploy Azure storage deploys to Azure CDN, not the Office 365 CDN. That's the big difference. Is it in the scope to extend Office to the core with the new methods like removing users from Office 365 group, adding users to Office 365? Do we still have to use Microsoft? That's a good question. That's actually a good idea. That's a yes. Good question from Aruna. We should have a look on that one. Right now, I'm not aware that we would have done that within the last month. Let's see if we can actually get that happen by the June release. So having a native support for removing users using the PnP core, so you don't have to jump into the Graph REST APIs. So we're looking into doing that absolutely in the core. That will help a lot of people. Good feedback. And yes, comment on the Paul's comment. We use the Graph API also for creating modern sites in the PnP core component. So the PnP core component is not only limited for SharePoint Online, it actually has Graph support already. So that's pretty cool. Is there a season method to deploy SPFX to app catalog and client-side web parts on a page on a modern page? On the Bastian's question, so we're looking into having a native API for deploying SharePoint Framework solutions to sites and also to add-in solutions to the site. Right now, that API doesn't exist. So you're able to get your solution to the app catalog, but the automation of deployment to the sites unfortunately doesn't exist. That's a native limitation in SharePoint Online. We have spec'd it out, but it is already, and it is in our backlog. I don't have a timeline for it. And we're looking into having all of that trust things and all of that automated. So that's absolutely something what we will do in the future. Would you advise that SPFX is the best choice of SP 2016 customization, even if we're still only at feature pack 1? From David, that's a good question. In the future, whenever the SharePoint Framework is available in on-premises, yes, you should do customizations using SharePoint Framework. Now, if you're in feature pack 1, you can't. There's no support for doing that. So basically, it's impossible to take that one in use. The SharePoint Framework is the customization model where we will make the most investments in the future. And we're looking into having that as the de facto standardized way of doing customization in both on-premises and in cloud. And it's a journey, it will take a while, but we'll get there. Good. Yes, that's a good comment from Brian. So you use React now, and then it's easier for you to convert the components when you have a feature back to. Using React is probably the easiest way. Angular or whatever JavaScript framework is supported as well. But we, from engineering, because we use React, then we are providing a set of reusable controls, which are the Office UI React Fabric components, and that would speed up your development. Technically, you can use Angular, you can use whatever you want to do. Again, up to you. And on Aruna's comment, there's other things like removing owners and adding owners not possible with the native support. Yeah, we're looking into having all of those things. That's good feedback. Let's have a look on having those APIs available in the PnP core as well, because already today you can create modern sites and groups using PnP core in Azure. Good. But I think that's it. We're hitting on the hour, so let's actually close up for this one. Thank you for joining. Sorry for having not too much time for the Q&A. Hopefully we had the exciting material available and refresh some of the materials, but I think it's worthwhile to always do some repeats as well. And let's see each other in the following SIG calls and community calls, and be active on the community in tech communities and all of that. So thank you everybody for joining, and the video will be up in the YouTube within 24 hours. Thank you.